Hi folks, today's video is something a little bit different. I just got done with the diagramming videos, so I kind of want to do something that's a little bit more relaxing, and I think some of you may be into this stuff. And it's all based around stuff that I've been discussing since 2015 or so. And basically, we know that Forrest is a pilot. And the poem sort of sounds like it might be describing a flight, right? So, and I don't mean that we need to learn how to navigate and fly like a real pilot. I mean using your imagination, right? For example, I have, this is some of the points from an old solve that I have, okay? And it's based around pretty much the Sinks Canyon being where warm water halts, okay? And the Homer Brown was lander. Well, basically, if you read the poem, where he says begin it, where warm waters halt, this is approximately 10 miles out, this yellow line, from the runway. So if he was flying in from the south, okay, and he wanted to fly over the mountain peaks here and then come down, he would probably begin his descent somewhere around 10 miles out, okay? So if you listen to it, you say begin descent where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk, put in below the Homer Brown. So I'm not trying to describe the whole solve here. I'm just trying to give you an example that he could be taking you on a virtual flight. You don't necessarily need to know all the details, but everything that he's describing could be seen from the sky, from a pilot's point of view, right? So he may be describing with the clues geographic features on Earth as seen from above. In the Moby Dickens video, he talks about this flight. He doesn't exactly describe it in detail, but one of the interesting things that I found when I was working on this, if you see this green line here that goes up into the center of lander, if we were to put in and land, by the way, these runway numbers are now out of date. It's not 3 and 21 anymore. It's 4 and 20 because the magnetic deviation over time changes. So the FAA renumbers runways when that happens, because basically this is runway 4 because this is roughly between 40 and 45 degrees, okay? And if you're coming in the other way, it's around 210, 220 degrees if you're coming in from the north. So what they do is you basically divide it by 10, and that would be your runway number. So runway, when it used to be 3, would be somewhere between 30 and 40 degrees if you're coming from the south. And 21 is roughly 210, okay? So that's how they name it. Now, these markers on the runway are usually after, like this zone down here, somewhere around here is where the plane's actually going to touch down, okay? So that, think of it as putting in, right? So anyway, this green line, if you were to follow it up in the lander, okay, what you're going to see when you get up there is this, okay? This is exactly where Fort Brown used to be. It was Fort Aguirre first, and then it became Fort Brown or Camp Brown, 1870 through 1878. At that point, it was moved in 78 up into the reservation and renamed Fort Washakie, okay? But prior to that, it was Fort Brown. Anyway, that if you look, this is actually a college here, okay? College offices. This is a pharmacy, and right where I put this marker is exactly where that thing is. It's actually embedded in the wall of the college, and it marks the exact location of where the fort was back in the day. In Lander, they also have a second monument, this one, which is over by the caboose, and it's a historical site, both of those monuments, except the fort wasn't exactly here. It was over at the first monument that I showed you. But here they describe all the forts that are nearby, and Camp Aguirre, and they have to Camp Brown again. And basically that item is down here. This is Main Street, okay? That marker is right here. Here's the caboose. That marker is right here. And here's the middle Poposia River coming down from Sinks Canyon. The river itself also puts in the Homer Brown, again, the middle Poposia. And then the middle Poposia continues out to here where it meets the confluence with the North Poposia. This becomes the Poposia River until it meets up with the Wind River. Prior to meeting up with the Wind River, it joins up with the Little Wind River around Hudson. Okay, so anyway, it's interesting to note that when you fly, you actually, if put in would be landing, you were putting in directly, literally, 180 degrees below the Homer Brown if Lander was the Homer Brown. Now, back then, you know, I had other reasons besides Camp Brown for calling Lander the Homer Brown. Lander is just known as the City of Bronze, okay? And as the City of Bronze, bronze is brown. Now, there are bronze statues all over the place here, and almost all of them are cast over here at Eagle Bronze Foundry, okay? If you go on the Main Street, I think it's right here. I may be wrong. It may be over here. One of these two places is got basically a cowboy, and he's rustling up a herd of cattle. Okay, so there's maybe 8 bronze statues, and then there's the cowboy on the horse with the rope, and all over here there's also a bunch of steer. There are bronze statues all over this town, and again, all of them are there. And there's a lot of famous bronze artists that use this foundry. I don't know if Forrest ever used it. It's very well possible that he did. But this was an interesting solve nonetheless, and it was based initially on flight. And there's a couple of interesting things about this. One of them is that if you look here, okay, this is City Hall. Look here. Okay, you see an X, right? In the center of that X is this is a war memorial, okay, and it has all the wars there, the Vietnam War, World War I, World War II, the Iraq War, Iraqi freedom, and basically there's a huge story behind this that a lot of people don't know. If you watched a movie called Taking Chance, which by the way, I'd recommend that movie. It's awesome. It's based around a hero. He was in high school in 2004. He graduated from high school in June, and he died in Iraq about 2 months after he got out of high school. He was already in the Marines, and he got deployed as soon as he left. But he died a hero with he got actually 2 Purple Hearts, I think, and he saved basically the whole group that was with him. He was one of the lead guys in a lead car protecting the people that were coming with him as they were going into a town, and he got killed there. Now, the interesting thing about this, the story behind this, is that this war memorial was had nothing there back in 2009. I think it was dedicated originally in 2001, 2002, but there was really nothing here except on top of this shape, the stop sign shape here. There was basically just a flat thing, some kind of an object. All right, and I guess it was kind of like a placeholder, because what eventually happened is they hired a well-known bronze artist called John Phelps is his name, and he lives in Du Bois. He's got a studio in Cody, but he's pretty well known there, and they contracted him to design a new statue. So back in 2003, when they did that, he had his son model wearing World War II gear, or World War I gear, I'm sorry, because that's what he was supposed to represent at the time. And his son is shown here. Okay. This is his son modeling for that statue. This photo was taken in 2003 or 2004. Okay. He was a senior in high school at the time. This is Chance Phelps. Okay. And this is, like I said, from late 2003 or early 2004. Okay. Just before he got out of high school. So he modeled for that statue. This is like the work in progress of that statue that is now sitting there. It was supposed to be rededicated in 2010, but it wasn't rededicated until 2011 because Chance died in 2004. So his father, I guess, obviously, he got pretty upset. And he still continued with the statue, though. But there was a 6 months to a year delay. So the statue didn't end up getting rededicated until, I think it was January or February of 2011. And now on top of there, this is the statue. And that is Chance. That's his son modeled for it, okay? And if you look quickly down on the statue and you read the plaques, there's some information on that he died in the Iraqi War. A lot of people don't realize that the sculptor's son is the model up there, okay? You notice this angle of this cross and the way he's facing. One of the things I noticed, and I actually talked to the museum about this, and they weren't aware of it, but it's pretty obvious to me that John Phelps, who, by the way, was also in the Air Force, John Phelps, for, I think, 20 years. So there's a really good chance that Forrest may know him. I don't know that, but he's a bronze guy. He's an Air Force guy, and he's from Wyoming. And I think he's slightly younger than Forrest. I don't know all the details. But the interesting thing about that is that statue is facing this way. Okay? It's facing this way, and the cross is facing that way, like a V. Well, if you look at where it's facing, it's actually facing the statue, Riverton. Okay? And the reason why it's facing Riverton is because that's where Chance Phelps was born. Chance Phelps was born in Riverton. And, you know, I guess he grew up his early years here in Riverton. Okay. Now the cross is angled where it's kind of facing Du Bois up here. And over here, if you look, the cemetery up here is where Chance is buried. The movie Taking Chance, when they did the funeral scene where the procession came down here, this is actually the way they went. Okay. And they stopped at Du Bois. He was buried here. And then the after party that you see in there was done at the VHW in Du Bois. Okay. So that's where all that took place. Anyway, that was an interesting solve. There's a lot more to it. I'm not really trying to explain the solve here. I'm just explaining to you that the poem could be describing a flight. And you see this yellow line, and we're putting in, you know, here, okay? And it's right below the home of Brown. And interesting enough, too, depending on what you think Meek is. Also, look at this. This runway is short. Tardy Scant with Marble Gaze, okay? Initially, My Blaze is the runway marker. Look quickly down, Your Quest to Cease. But Tarry Scant with Marble Gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. If you don't pay attention to that, there's a chance that you're going to overshoot the runway. And the runway scant or short. If you overshoot this runway, you're going to crash somewhere, or you may crash into this famous cemetery up here, which is where Clayton Danks is buried, and Benjamin Franklin Lowe, which are two pretty famous people as far as this town goes. First of all, Lander is the location of the first paid rodeo. It's not where the first rodeo was, but the first paid rodeo. Second, Clayton Danks performed at the rodeo many times and won, and he rode the horse called Steamboat. Now, Steamboat is the horse that's on the iconic logo or whatever for the state of Wyoming. It's got a picture of a man on a horse. Well, there's always been argument whether the man on a horse is Bill Cody or it's Clayton Danks. It's an argument that people have. I don't know, but a lot of people say it was Clayton Danks. Either way, the horse is Steamboat. Steamboat was here. Okay. Steamboat is actually buried in Colorado, but Clayton, the guy who wrote it, or one of the guys who wrote it, is buried here. Benjamin Franklin Lowe was basically owned the majority of this property here, where what ended up becoming the fort. You know, when this land was ceded back to us from the Indians, and then they moved Fort Washakie, or they renamed Camp Brown to Fort Washakie, and they moved it up here. Okay, this is the Indian reservation. Okay, if we turn on the Wind River Reservation, that's the Wind River Indian Reservation there. Okay. So if you were to leave here, it's no place for the meek. This is all Indian territory. Okay, so you're not, the meek wouldn't go in there. Anyway, that's the Indian territory. And then we have Fremont County is blue. And Yellowstone, of course, is up there. This is the Yellowstone boundary. You can see it goes outside of the state of Wyoming slightly. I don't know if you knew that or not. So basically, that's one of the things I wanted to discuss to you. So now I'm gonna take it in another step. Now, so far what I've shown you, as far as pretending it's a virtual flight, doesn't require really any special knowledge. You can imagine that you're flying over there by just reading the poem. Okay, maybe the Camp Brown stuff is knowledge, but you're going to need some knowledge, geographic knowledge. This is going to be forever known as Camp Brown. That's never going to change. It's not a building. It's an area. It's a region. Okay, the home of Brown. Okay, you could say your home is in your town. Okay, so the home of Brown could be that, but that's not really what we're discussing here. Anyway, my next part is I want to take it another step farther, and this would be special knowledge, but I want to bring it up because many of you may find it interesting. I want to let you know, first off, I am not a pilot, but I have used flight simulators very frequently. In fact, I probably invested a couple $1,000s over the years buying various airplanes and jetliners. I even have the same plane that Forrest owned when he made his trips to Lander. I have a Piper Mirage. It's of course, you know, one that runs in a flight simulator. I think I paid like $40 for it years ago. I own a 777, 747, various jets, and small general aviation planes. I own upgraded scenery that I spent a lot of money on for the entire Rockies. This was before Forrest Fenn. I just bought it because I liked flying around up here. I liked the scenery. So although my flight simulator isn't exact when it comes to the buildings, the roads in it are exact, and so is the graphics, the elevations, and the canyons and everything, because they're all based on real-world satellite data. What they do, though, is in there they know that this is a town, for example, so they have an algorithm that populates it with buildings. So not all the local streets and stuff are going to be right, but major roads are right, and rivers are right, and valleys and mountains and everything are correctly depicted. So are major landmarks, Old Faithful, Devil's Tower. You can actually do flybys, and I always enjoyed doing stuff like that long before Forrest. So first I want to mention two things. In flight, you have two different flight rules. They have VFR and IFR. VFR stands for Visual Flight Rules, meaning that you're just going to go out and fly around and maybe do crop dusting. Everything is visual. You're not really going to be using any instrumentation in the plane, okay? And then they have IFR, which is instrument flight rules. Instrument flight rules are used, of course, by commercial airlines, and they're also used by pilots in bad weather. Or basically anybody could really use them, especially now that we got GPS. You know, your plane is pretty much flying itself. But I wanted to mention that although it looks like planes fly in random locations and random directions, they don't. You don't just take a plane and if you want to fly from Florida to New Jersey, just fly an air, head north and go. The airspace, due to the amount of flights we have, and this is all worldwide, by the way. This is not just the USA. It's broken up into high and low altitude, what they call Victor airways and jetways. Okay, imagine that there's highways all over in the sky. So let me show you a picture of that. This is a site that has, you know, maybe this is one of the maps that Forrest wants us to use. And in here, you could see the airways. A lot of them are depicted by blue. And then I'm not zoomed out enough. There are other websites, but you could see the high altitude ones and the low altitude ones. You could see all of the navigational aids. You could see airports. This, incidentally, is Lander right here. And this is the Lander Airport. There's Riverton. Of course, the Wind River Mountains and stuff. Now, on this map, they do special things that are kind of different from a normal map. First of all, there's navigation aids on the map. And second of all, there may be obstructions, high trees, high towers, things that pilots would need to be aware of depending on the altitude that they're flying at. And of course, the altitude of the mountains themselves is on here. Okay, 13,500 feet, 14,200 feet, blah, 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 right? 8,000 feet. Now, navigation aids, there's a bunch of them, but I'm going to talk about two of them in particular. One of them is called the non-directional beacon, and the short acronym for it is NDB. What it does, it emits a signal in all directions, okay? It doesn't, there's no way to tell how far you are from it. Just imagine that it's saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, and it's flashing like a beacon, but it's sending out, you know, not in any specific direction. It's just emitting a signal that you can pick up on a radio that goes out in all directions. Now, back in the old days, you know, a pilot could say to the air traffic control that I am bearing 75 degrees of ABC. ABC would be the navigation point, and you could see all the degrees coming out of it. Okay, so if you were 36 degrees out of, you would be somewhere up here. Now the NDB doesn't have, or some of them don't have distant measuring equipment. Okay, so that's what you see DME here and VOR. If it doesn't have DME, then you can't tell how far away from it you are. You can only tell what angle it is from you. Okay, but if you look at airplanes, they have two radios in there, and what you can do is you could tune each radio to a different frequency. So you tune one radio to the frequency of this, and then you tune another radio to this frequency, let's say, and now when you're flying, you could see the angle you are from here and the angle that you are from here, and you could kind of triangulate to figure out where you are in space, you know. And of course, you have your gauge for your altitude. And now, eventually, as the things advanced, they came out with VOR, which is what you see here. Okay, a VOR, which most VORs do have DME. This one's at the Riverton Airport. Okay, and the radio frequency is here. You know, the VOR is 122.2. Okay, and basically, what those are called omnidirectional, VHF, omnidirectional radio. Unlike an NDB, these things actually rotate, kind of like the radars you see on ship, where they're spinning around, and it shoots out 360 signals, and it spins clockwise, by the way. So 360 signals, and included in the signal, it embeds the distance from the VOR. So now the pilot would know, he would be able to say, I am 10 miles outbound on 270 from ABC, meaning he's heading west and 10 nautical miles away from the VOR. If he was heading to the VOR, he would be flying on the 90. And since you can obtain an angle from the VOR, all airplanes have two VHF radios. You can also use them to triangulate an exact fix that you want to fly to, or of course your current position. Now, of course, now we have technology where GPS, a lot of this stuff is still used by the hardware, but the GPS is basically taking you there, and even smaller planes can use GPS. Large airlines have what they call a flight management system, which is an FMS. And flight management systems are really advanced. And what they can do is you can load a flight plan that consists of a bunch of named fixes, named VORs, named NDBs, named airports, whatever they are. They usually have a 3 to 5 letter name. And because it's a flight management system, it's a computer, it knows that. And so does advanced GPS. It knows it. So you don't need to enter longitude and latitude. Just entering the fixed name, the computer knows where that longitude and latitude is. So you don't have to know it. So it makes things a lot easier. Okay. And those NDBs and VORs are actually named, as I said, 3 to 5 letters usually. And they have funny names. For example, and these are all from around the Rocky Mountains: Woods, WOODS; Yellowstone, YLSTN; Pinion, and yeah, I do mean Pinion. It's PNYON. Okay, you can see them in here. If you look around, you'll see well, even the airports, KLND. Okay, but the navigation aids, you know, are named on these maps. Okay, and advanced GPS, the databases, and the FMS, you can enter letters, and it automatically would take one, you know, like in other words, Woods, wherever that is, that's a precise longitude, latitude, precise. It's not an estimate. I think it's exact. So I could say, Forrest, you know, head over to Woods, and he could look up Woods, because no two navigation within a chart, no two are in the same location. So if he knew the map, sectional map, and he knew Woods, he could go directly to the wood without me telling him any numbers. Okay. Now it gets even more interesting, because if you're doing IFR, and because of the amount of traffic we have, air traffic controllers in the old days used to do what they call vectoring somebody in or out. If they had a commercial airline coming in, they would take them from the airway down to airspace. They would vector them. They would give them locations. Tell them, go from here to here to here, just like we give people directions. Go down 5th Street, make a left onto Fifth Avenue, and then blah, blah, blah. Well, they would say, go to this fix, and then head, 310 degrees to this fix. Well, that worked out fine in the beginning, but over time, we had too many flights, and the air traffic controllers got too much work. They can't do that with each and every plane out there. So what they did is they grouped a bunch of fixes. And by fixes, again, I mean, NDBs, VORs, airports, maybe just coordinates. There's some of them out there that are just called fixes, and they just have coordinates that are named. So what they did is they grab a bunch of them and they group them. What they do, imagine it like a funnel. You have major airways in the air, and if you were flying from, let's say, New York down to Florida, and you were coming into Orlando Airport, they know which airway you're going to be on. So what they need to do is vector you from that airway to whatever runway you're going on. And that would depend on the wind and various other things, and traffic, or maybe there's an emergency. But instead of having to name each point to you, well, they have what's called a star. And that'll take the plane from the last air point last waypoint on the airway into airport airspace. Imagine it like a highway off-ramp. You know, take this exit. Okay, so what they do is they can enter in a computer a 5 or 6 letter code, and that 5 or 6 letter code name actually contains, let's say, 10 waypoints. They don't need to name the individual waypoints. They don't need to give you the longitude and latitude, 20 longitude and latitude pairs. I mean, 20 longitudes and 20 latitude, 10 pairs to vector you in. They just tell you, follow this star. So, you know, there's websites out there that you can look it up. Like here. I got Orlando. Okay, this is for Orlando Airport. All right. I can get that from airnav.com. This stuff is always updated by the FAA, and so are the computers in the planes and the GPS. And we can see all the airport communication frequencies, any navigational aid frequencies, distances, information about obstructions and stuff like that. All the runways, the lengths of the runways, the elevations, and all the stuff that a pilot would need. Okay. Now, if we look down here, here's your stars, standard terminal arrivals. Okay. So let's take a look at, for example, Goofy. Now, Goofy is going to take us from the north. Okay. We're coming in from the north. So they instead of saying all of these waypoints, okay, Sabot, Odell, and so on, they could just say, you know, basically Goofy. Follow Goofy. 7 it's kind of like a version number. It's Goofy 7. So now the plane knows how to get to the airport, and also it knows what kind of holding pattern it needs to go into before it lands. And you notice all of these degrees and headings, and again, there's the Lakeland LAL, waypoint, Sabot, and they don't need to mention all of this stuff. They don't need to mention everything. They just tell you to take that, okay? And now, if we look, they got what's called the instrument approach procedure. Now, think of the approach procedure as it takes you from, once you get into airspace, it takes you down onto the ground. Kind of like if you entered a regular parking lot in your car and they had a parking lot attendant there. He's going to direct you to the spot. That's essentially what an IAP does, okay? And they also have sectional charts, which have things on there, waypoints, hazards, power lines, and those are used basically with VFR rules, right? So we could take a look at one of the IAPs, and you can see here, this is all basically, this is like a side view of the altitude requirements. Got to stay above 6,000, above 5,000, above 4,000, 2,500, 1,600, and it's basically taking you down to the runway. These are the runways here, and some of them have a lot more details. But basically, this is guiding the plane in. That's what that's for. And that for leaving the airport, they have the opposite. Okay, here's Jaguar 6. If you're departing north from Orlando, okay, then you would basically, it's the same thing again. It's directing you out from here. Now they don't know where you're going, and you're leaving their space. They're directing you out of their airspace, and they transfer you to another air traffic control. But these are called SIDs, okay? These are departure. And again, all of the departure procedures are all here for the Orlando airport. They got Citrus One, Jaguar, McCoy, Orlando, you know. See what I mean? These are all named. Like I say, Citrus One, it could have 10 points in it. The computer knows how many points are in there. It's also documented, and so would the GPS know. Same thing with Jaguar. So Forrest can literally say one word and be giving you 10 longitude and latitude points. And the same thing with the terminal arrivals. We got Barron, we got Bitho, we got Bugs, we got CoStar, we got SeaWorld, we got Goofy, we got Lease, we got Minnie, we got Piglet. Now, if you go in the Rockies, of course, they're all themed after the Rockies. If you go to New Mexico, they'll be themed after New Mexico. The names usually don't change and neither do the points in it. They can, and that's why everything is in computer databases. But it's pretty cool stuff. So I just wanted to point that out. Yes, it's advanced, but it's just another way that Forrest, maybe this is a map that would come in handy for somebody. Okay, it's kind of like a topographical map, except it's for pilots, and the pilot's looking down on everything. But you'll see if you look at these, there's everything is named. They got POY, Powell, Bridger, Red Lodge. It's called Red. Yeah. Well, here's Billings, Montana. But all of those airports, again, if you know the airport, you can look up the airport's code, like Orlando's KMCO. You can come to airnav.com, and it's got the airports here. You would look it up by code here. You can also look up NavAids. Go to SkyVector. And SkyVector's got airports in here. You can look up. They got the charts in here. You can pick out where you want to go or where you're going to go. So like if you're, down in New Mexico, so you can see all the New Mexico area. You'll see SkyVector is actually using the same map that I took you to here in VFRmap.com. But SkyVector SkyVector also shows you the low altitude and high altitude airways and world. I mean, these are all the airways in the United States. These, of course, go across the ocean here. But as you'll see, they're all named. All of them are named. I can go on it. This is 130, J58, Q88, or Q130. So as you can see, things aren't random in the sky. And some of the stuff he's talking about in the poem could be in the sky. I'm putting it out there because it could be. And certainly I wanted to describe the virtual flight, because that could be true even if you don't pay attention to any of this stuff here. But do with it what you will. It's interesting stuff. And by the way, if you do get into virtual flight, I would recommend, I use Flight Simulator, which that's what I spent most of my money on, Microsoft Flight Simulator. It was the best, but now I use X-Plane. Unfortunately, I don't have upgraded graphics for the X-Plane, but it's really cool to fly around yourself. And it's nice to be able to kind of, in X-Plane, you can actually land the plane and get out. And it's nice to be standing. And when you look around, it really gives you a perspective kind of what you're going to see when you're there. I mean, the trees and stuff are fake, obviously. It puts them there. It knows what kind of trees are there, and it just draws them with algorithms. But still, when you're looking down at a flat map like this, as many of you know who've been boots on the ground, it's really, really difficult. When you get there, things obviously are a lot bigger than what you thought when you're looking at Google Earth. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I enjoy doing these on occasion just to slip stuff out there like this. And again, I've been talking about the flight stuff for years. You could find it posted on Dow's in a lot more detail, and also on Jenny's. So I figured it was about time I throw this video out there. So if you like my channel, please subscribe and hit that like button below. Also, be sure to pass this video around. And again, have a great day.